on that. So we'll go ahead and move forward. Syllabus. Oh yeah, I do have some copies of the syllabus. I didn't print out a whole bunch of copies of the syllabus because I think it's a waste of paper. So if you really want one, go ahead and raise your hand. See how many I've got. And then I'll pass out a schedule. Because I think the schedule is probably a little bit more important. So we'll have a copy of the schedule regardless. All of this is on Canvas.
No, I think he did. Because he looked at me and I was like, everybody's so like, I'm retarded.
Oh, sorry, that's the schedule. Here's the schedule. Oh, the schedule's at the back. Oh, perfect. The schedule not on it?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Well,
That's news.
his brain is well, I was the last one on the bed. Because then Adam's like.
So one of the issues with recording lectures, by the way, it's always kind of fun, is I may have a hard time starting to record it, but then once it's actually started, I have a very hard time stopping it. So one of the things you'll notice if you watch the lecture videos is that you'll sometimes run into a lot of dead air. For instance, right now, I forgot to stop the recording. So you probably just hear a bunch of random sounds while passing stuff out. Same kind of deal for quizzes. So if there were ever quizzes,
Thank you.
I have a bad habit of not stopping the recording. So as far as how you should refer to me, everybody likes this instructor, professor, sir stuff. I tend to not be one of those professors. I prefer Mike. Mike is easy to stick with. Mike makes me happy and I don't have to worry about it. If for some reason you really need to call me professor or instructor or any of that, I'm not going to give you too hard of a time for it. Mainly because I told my brother that I gave students a hard time for it. He's like, no, that's a sign of respect. You should accept people that actually say that. You know, it's a good thing. And you're full of crap. But so if you feel like adding some acronym onto the end of that, I'm fine with that. But Mike works just as easily. Office hours. I will be holding a lot of office hours. All of my office hours will be held in the tutor center, in library 228. Okay. There's a couple reasons behind that. The primary one, in my opinion, is to try and get you used to going to the tutoring center because there are tutors there that can help you with the material and get you through the class. You don't have to come to me. So it kind of builds that facilitation for you getting into the tutoring center and getting that help, regardless if it's coming from me or not. Okay?
Chemistry, biology.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
It's just the science center.
Yeah. I don't know exactly what it's called. I know it's library 228. That's about all I know. So if you walk in the front door, up the stairs, and immediately U-turn, pretty much U-turn all the way around, you're there. So those hours, Monday and Wednesday, 10 to 11, and then Thursday, in place of the lab session, because the class is small enough, we don't have a second lab open. I'll fill that time with office hours, so 10 to 2 on Thursday. Occasionally I'll be there on Fridays. That really just depends on the schedule or on my schedule. Sometimes I'll be there, sometimes not. You should probably send me an email before making a special trip out here to get help. Okay? And then by email. I tend to be fairly responsive through email, so send me an email with your questions depending on if I think it's a personal question versus a question about the material. I may copy and paste my reply to you into the discussion board on Canvas so that everybody has access to that information at the same time. Ideally, you're posting your questions to the discussion board. I will be checking there as frequently as I can to answer questions, but then I would hope that you guys also help each other out and start responding to answers there as well. Okay? Primarily because the front end of this class, or the name of this class, is bio, okay? Biology. And anybody that knows me, I have a very low opinion of biology. Okay? Not for any real reason. It's just I'm not a particular fan of biology. Okay? So when there's biology topics coming up, which we'll see in the first chapter where we talk a little bit about what makes prokaryotes, eukaryotes, and organelles and stuff like that, I'm pretty much just making stuff up. It's not quite that bad, but it's pretty close. I just don't find that part of it all that interesting because I could look at a book and say, okay, tell me the answer. What does the organelle do? It does this. Okay, move on. Where I think it's more interesting is when you start looking at the proteins, how those proteins interact, looking at the fundamentals behind those. So ultimately, the chemistry aspect of biochemistry is where I'll actually add a little bit more information to it. Okay? So we got the canvas, all that fun stuff. Course background. So this is something that's going to become really, really important, primarily for how I've got to gauge and organize the class. Hopefully you've all checked out Canvas. If you haven't, don't stress about it. But I think the very first post I put on Canvas is I want you to be aware of what this course satisfies and what it does not satisfy. Okay? Biochemistry is by definition an upper division class. Community colleges do not offer upper division credit. Okay? That means what you are taking is a lower division biochemistry class that very few schools will accept as transfer credits. Okay? So you need to make sure that wherever you're planning on going with this class, okay, if you're planning on having it transfer across, you need to verify with that other institution that this class will work. Okay? Otherwise, what it may very well end up being is just elective credit. Okay? Everybody needs elective credits. You still need that to graduate. Okay? But it may not satisfy a biochemistry requirement. Okay? So be aware of that limitation. Big issues that I would guess, med schools. I've talked to a few students that were planning on going into med school, and they did careful checks. This class does not satisfy it, okay, for the majority of med schools. They really want that upper division credit. Okay, so you can think about things or institutions that typically require a 4-year degree or lots of learning before getting admitted to. This probably isn't going to cut it. Okay, so one of the things that they tend to look for is, yes, you took classes at the community college, but then can you transfer that knowledge to a larger institution that has more strenuous courses? Okay? Because you could get a straight A in the community college and then get to a 4-year university and get C's. Well, that means the A's that you got at the community college were worthless. Okay? So one of the things that they do evaluate is that when you move up to a more strenuous system, do you still maintain that same level of skill? Okay. So I want you to be aware of some of those limitations, because the last thing I want, and it happens fairly regularly, particularly with, it goes back to my hate of biology advisors at ASU, students will end up finding out at the very end of the semester, hey, I didn't need that class. Okay. So they just spent a semester and all that money on a class that was completely useless to them. Okay. So I really want to be upfront with that. The next part of this is also going to come back to your overall backgrounds. Okay? And that's a lot of what this slide is actually talking about. Where are you coming from? What information do you have? I do know some of you, so I know some of your general backgrounds on what information you've had. Because you've had me, I know your background's perfect. Ha. That's a stretch. Because it's typically an upper division class, the requirements tend to be more strict. So you're usually expected to go through 2 years of chemistry and probably up to calculus or through a first semester of calculus mathematics. We will be talking about some sort of math intensive, algebra intensive shuffles when we're getting into kinetics and rates of enzyme activities. So if you haven't had that math background or that larger chemistry background, that section of the material is going to become a lot more difficult, okay? And that's going to require extra effort on your part and mine, okay? So I will be available to get you that extra information to make sure you're kind of up to the level that you need to get through that section of the material, okay? But again, I need you to know that information before you jump into this. I don't want you to get up, it's like 5th or 6th week, I think, and then find out, oh my God, this is ridiculous, I can't spend the time on it. Yes.
Does 2 years of chem mean like
1 year of all of the general chem and then 1 year of all of the organic chem.
Yeah. So that's the standard. Typically. They do have kind of pseudo end runs around that, which is the other version of it where you have 1 year of chem, so that's Chem 130, and then, or at least at the community college, Chem 130 and Chem 230. And then I went through and looked at the math requirements. The math requirements for Chem 130, okay, is not even college level mathematics. Okay? So you don't have to take any college level mathematics and you're fine for Chem 130. Well, what's the prereq for Chem 230? Well, Chem 130. There is no math prereq. So the math prerequisite officially for this course is nothing. Okay? And if we go through some very intensive mathematics partway through, that's going to come as a big shock. Okay? So I want you to be aware of those limitations so that you know what's going on with it. Okay? So we can do a slight self-test here. I just kind of want you to think about where you would fall in these two ranges, either in that category 1 where you're dealing with the more chemistry and hopefully that calculus upper level, and then category 2 where you're looking at a very compressed section of chemistry, so you're looking at probably a year of chemistry and maybe very little math background. Okay? I'm not trying to judge anybody, so don't feel bad if you're in one of those categories or another. Okay? What I want you to do is be honest with that so that when I ask you later on for that information, I can then try and adjust the course and say, okay, you know what? I'm going to blast through this information because it's just stuff in the textbook. There's nothing for me to talk about. But I'll fill that time with a little bit heavier mathematics introduction to it, so hopefully everybody's on the same page. Okay? Kind of makes sense? And yes, I will ask for that a little bit later. Okay? Questions about that? Okay, I do feel kind of bad about that because we got this class, it's all up and running, and then you come in with the class and your instructor's like, yeah, this class isn't the greatest option. Okay. And there's still debates within the community college system whether this class should be offered at all. Okay.
Science in addition.
What's that?
You see that some of the pharmacists just need a science in addition.
Yeah, so the ones that I've seen that accept it seem to be pharmacy. A lot of the farm programs seem to accept it and without any problems. And if you've checked it, let me know what your background is too, where you plan on going, because then when I teach it again, because it sounds like I'm going to be teaching it until I leave, I can then educate students better on where they need to go and say, okay, pharmacy does accept it if you go to these schools. If you go to these schools, they don't accept it, that kind of thing. Okay. I like that extra information because then I can help guide students around. Okay. Particularly, what's that?
You have a med school in downtown.
Yeah.
They said they didn't care as long as it's biochem. They said they didn't care about a level.
Colorado requires you to
Yes.
take biochem at a university.
Yes and no. So that's the issue, is some do and some don't, and that's where it becomes this very big gray
I
area.
just know that they.
Well, since
and-
U of A is this primary, you know.
The feeder here, we
yeah,
would expect
so
that
it
wouldn't
makes
as
sense
big
to
of an
have
issue.
them.
And biochemistry as a class for med school is going to be required, guaranteed. It's where it's required, or what level. The lower division version that you're going to get at the community college, I hate to say it, I don't think is going to work for med school. I really don't.
We went on a tour there last year,
Yeah.
and because like the Tucson campus doesn't require biochem, but the Phoenix campus does.
Oh, Tucson doesn't even require it?
Yeah, they do.
Really, they did last year.
Yeah.
But anyways, and I was like, is there a particular level of biochem that? Because she told me like when we were on the tour, she's like, well, we require it here, but Tucson doesn't.
Oh, that's
And
interesting.
I was like, well, is there a particular level, like 300, 400? She's like, as long as it says biochem, we don't care.
Maybe
Yeah.
check with an advisor. I'll
I
check
would
with an advisor.
really push to the advisors
Yeah.
to really, and it's not just, is it biochem or what level? It's, this is lower division biochem. And that lower division is really the key in that. And the students that I've talked to already about it, one of them very first said, no one seems to care.
Yeah.
And I said, well, check again and say lower division. Make sure you make that statement to the admission school. And as soon as they made that statement, they were like, yeah, we don't really like that.
Because it's a
So-
260 and not a 360 or a 460.
Yes. Yeah.
The biotech pipeline with M2C does require 260.
Well, so that's
One of-
one of the reasons why 260 was created, was for the biotech program. Okay. So it is designed with that in mind, which to me means that this class is only for that niche market of if you're in that biotech pathway. Otherwise, it makes it very questionable for everybody else. So yeah, for the biotech pathway, it is absolutely valid.
If you guys are looking for med schools out in Texas and also Michigan, doesn't require for biochem.
Yeah, there's a lot of them that don't.
Yeah, there's a lot of places that doesn't, but if you wanna go to like more like the higher, I mean, more money
Yeah.
and tuition, they need biochem.
But they require biochem in med school, right, all of them, so.
Well,
Yes.
Because you end up taking it again. You
Yeah.
end up taking
Yeah.
biochem.
So
There, but if
all
you've
med
not had
programs
it,
are gonna
if you-
require it.
From what I've been told, if you've not had any biochem and you go to med school and you're taking biochem, with everything else you have to do,
That's
first time you're taking
so
biochem, it's really rough.
one of the plans
So-
behind this class is to really introduce you to a lot of the terminology. So as much as I dislike strict definitions and kind of rote memorizations, which is one of the reasons why I didn't like biology, that is probably what we'll see a lot of on the tests. Okay? What is primary structure? What is tertiary structure? And then because I like the application parts, I will then also ask kind of these application-based systems. But really, this is supposed to be a very superficial overview, and that means that when you go into a more advanced biochem, you just want to be able to know what those words mean, so that when they start talking about the applications, you don't have a definition and application to worry about. Okay? So that is definitely kind of the intent of the class. Okay? Course materials. All the lectures are going to get based on this textbook, the Campbell and Farrell biochemistry textbook. I haven't looked at the price tag, and the publisher just sent me an 8th edition, so I don't even know if you can buy the 7th edition new anymore. I personally would never recommend to buy a new textbook. If you're flush with cash, go for it. Otherwise, textbooks are outrageously expensive. You do need something to kind of supplement what's happening in the lectures, because that's where you'll see a lot more of the definitions. It'll get written down. You can kind of process that information. Okay? But it does not have to strictly be this textbook. Just realize that I have organized the schedule according to this textbook. Okay? In digging around on YouTube, ultimately trying to set up this lecture, because Cengage, I think the publisher for that one, didn't give me any supplies, so I have no images from the textbook at this point, which makes it very frustrating to actually set up slides and say, oh, this was a cool picture in your textbook, and let me draw it in Paint. So I'm working on getting those images in, so I've been, at least this slideshow covers entirely chapter 1. So all the slides that have been posted, I think I posted them last night, are for chapter 1. And pretty much everything I had to butcher from somewhere in the internet. Okay? And in the process of that search, Oregon State University, I think, lectures very oddly out of this textbook. And they've written their own textbook that students can use for free. So I'll post a link to that, because that textbook is probably very closely going to match this. I have no idea how they're avoiding copyright issues on that, because you can use our free one or buy this book, and then their lecture section is directly out of this textbook. So it looks like a massive copyright infringement.
If y'all wanted, I have a PDF version of it.
I didn't hear that. I didn't hear that.
Is that how you got it? Well, the thing is that really wouldn't be copyright infringement if they obtained permission for higher learning, right? So that's.
If they obtained permission, they could have gotten around that.
Yeah.
You're looking at Oregon State, they're fairly large, at least that video is a fairly large lecture room. You're looking at maybe 150 students. Biochemistry is probably going to cap out at that size. They're not going to get much bigger. So you're looking at the largest program you can possibly get, now saying we're going to use everything in your book but not pay you for it. I'm pretty sure no publishing system is going to say, oh, that's fine. Go ahead and steal all our money.
Yeah.
So yes, they could have gotten permission, but that seems unlikely to me. So I will get information up about that alternate source. And I have nothing, or have heard nothing about potential PDFs being available. You can talk to him if you want to get that figured out. Okay. Homework, to kind of push immediate response, because I hate grading homework, and any way I do homework is that you write it in a notebook, I look at it, make sure you did something, and then I give it back to you. There's zero feedback whatsoever. It's did you attempt to work on the assignments? To get around that and actually give you some feedback and potentially some learning ability, we're going to use an online homework system. Do not buy it in the bookstore, period. Okay. The Sapling homework. Okay. It is $26.99 if you buy it from Sapling. There are directions in the syllabus, which is also on Canvas, on how to get it online. If you buy it from the bookstore, you get a little slip of paper with, admittedly, the fun little scratch-off thing for an extra $10. Okay? So the bookstore is charging $37 to sell you a piece of paper, okay, with a scratcher. Okay? So please, please, please don't spend the extra $10. Okay? Just buy it online. Lecture notes, I will attempt to post all my lecture notes, hopefully the night before, if not sooner than that. I do have this issue because I'm generating the notes, that sometimes when I post, there's a slide overlap, which I personally would find very frustrating if I was a student. If I go to print out all the slides and 20 slides are the exact same that I've already printed out. I'm trying to come up with a better system to kind of mitigate that slide overlap, but I can't guarantee that that's not going to happen. Okay? So be aware that if you download the slides, you might very well say, I only want to print slides 10 through 15 because the first 10 I already have. Okay? Lecture videos, everything will get recorded and posted to YouTube. If you actually want to check out the channel, it's CGC Chem Mic. Otherwise, you'll just have links on Canvas. Okay? So this lecture will get posted up there. Not that you'll probably want to listen to the beginning part of it, but it at least gives you something to follow and kind of track down. Okay? Questions about any of those materials? Or anything that I forgot? Yesterday I forgot a whole bunch of things off of my syllabus. It was awesome. The Sapling homework, there's always a learning curve with online material. So to mitigate that learning curve issue of entering things wrong even though it's right kind of things, I'll grade the homework on a slightly adjusted scale. So if your Sapling percentage is 90 to 100%, in that range, I'll give you 100 points. Okay? And since the homework's worth 100 points, that's a perfect score. If you're in 75 to 90, you get 90 points. Okay? So if you can do C material on your homework, you get an A as far as points go. Okay? The average that I end up shooting for when it comes to homework is about 85%, okay? 85 points out of the possible 100. So if for some reason it looks like we're having a lot of trouble getting the homework done appropriately or correctly, I'll adjust and drop those down a little bit further to give you some more points to kind of fill it in. And yeah.
How often do you do quizzes?
I think that's the next slide. That will be on the next slide. Any questions about the homework? Yes.
Can you describe for me a little bit about what the learning curve is about with that? Is it a technical problem you're having?
It's all online homework systems have issues with how they grade, and that's because when you build that homework system, you say this is the answer. Usually where it becomes, and I haven't dealt with the biochem, so I don't know exactly what's going on with it, but if you look at general chemistry, the answer is 3.64, and you have to have those 3 sig figs. If you put 3.65, you rounded wrong. It's the whole answer is wrong. So they tell you it's incorrect, and then you have no idea what's going on. Okay. Those kind of rounding issues are things that I'm looking for. The other thing that you'll run into is syntax. And I ran into this with Chem 152 this last summer. One of the initial homework programs we were using, the syntax was awful. You had to go through and play around with it to try and get it set up, but if you missed a space, or if you put in a space, now all of a sudden it's wrong, but you can't see the space. You can't see that character blank. So you end up getting the answer wrong, even though it looks perfectly right.
So those are technical
Right.
issues.
And
They
those
don't-
are
they're
technical
selling
issues.
something essentially
And-
before it's ready.
Well, so the issue is they can't fix that. There is nothing you can do to fix
They need
that.
to go out of business.
Okay. Well, if you go out, well, because really what ends up happening is you then have to have graders to go through and grade everything. Okay. Schools don't have the funding to do that. Okay. The online homework system works when you hit that exact format. And Sapling has done a good job because their system, you set up, you say this is the answer, here are 4 other possible answers. Okay? Because maybe somebody capitalized it, and some of the bulk homework systems that I've seen other than Sapling, their answers need to be capitalized. So if the answer is biochemistry, where it's a capital B, capital C, and you do it all lowercase, it's now wrong. Okay. Sapling has done a much better job of setting up their system and preventing a lot of those issues. When it comes to organic chemistry, the issue that they have there is sometimes you'll do a double click by accident. So when you're drawing out a structure, you put down a carbon, you double click, you put down a carbon immediately on top of it. You can't see that. The program does. Okay. That's a technical glitch within the system that is really impossible to fix. Okay? Unless they say when you click, it always shifts off, and that's going to be a problem too with drawing things. Okay? So there will be online glitches with that. The problems that I've gone through and seen so far have been a lot of kind of matching and organizing, not seeing a whole lot of raw entry of data. The entry is really where it becomes a problem. Okay. Multiple choice and other things like that, not a problem. Okay.
So, don't get too frustrated when your answers
Don't
are
get too
wrong.
frustrated. If you get it, so this is what I usually tell people. If you get it wrong once, feel free to try it again. If you get it wrong twice, something's wrong, okay, either with what you understand or with the program. Send an email to me, talk to a tutor. Okay? If you talk to a tutor, try it a 3rd time. If it's still wrong, there's something really missing. You need to talk to me. Okay? Continuing to click through it is not going to work. Okay? It's shocking how many times I'll look at an assignment that someone's attempted, and they've got 20 attempts at a problem, where 10 of the attempts are the exact same thing. Okay? Literally the exact same thing. Oh, the computer must not have graded that right. Let me click submit again. Oh, it didn't grade it right that time. I'm not going to change anything and click submit again. Okay? You do have to make those adjustments and changes. Usually if something pops up where you think something's weird like that, you completely clear your answer and you try again. Okay. You should never be attempting more than 3 or 4 times. Okay? Other questions on the homework?
Can you attempt it as much as you can?
Yes. Yeah, with the homework systems, you can attempt it as many times as possible. They do subtract points, and it depends on the question how many points they subtract. Usually with the organization, like I played around with labeling organelles, and I knew most of them, but not all of them, and putting those in, I swapped 2 of them. All I had to do was then reattempt and swap them back the other direction. It was between those 2, I didn't know, so swapped them. And I got 95% of the points on that question. Okay. Because there's so many different ways that you can put in your answers. If they ask you a true-false question, and the answer is false, and you say true, you're going to lose all of the points. Okay? Because there is only one other option. They do kind of logically assign how they subtract points. Okay? With the assessments, the quizzes, they'll happen in class, probably run in the 5-minute range, maybe depending on how tired I am or how much time I have left in the class. I might make them longer, but for the most part, they'll be about 5 minutes. Ask probably 2 to 3 questions, and then you'll just turn those in. Okay? As far as how many there will be, I'm not using the quizzes as a point deduction. So I'll use the quizzes more to assess both what you know for your own benefit. So you get now questions where I say, hey, I think this is an important question. Okay, can you answer it? Okay. So it allows you to get a feel for what I'm going to ask, but then it also allows me to get a feel for what you understand. Okay? That's really why they're being used. So I may use 20 throughout the semester. They're only worth a total of, I think, 50 points, according to the syllabus. And I haven't decided exactly how I'll break down the quizzes. It'll probably be 5 points a quiz. Okay, if I ask 20 quizzes, that's an extra 10 quizzes. What do I do with the extra 10 quizzes? Well, the ones that are the 10 lowest, I completely remove. So for the most part, in every class I've taught, the quiz score is the maximum possible. Okay? So don't stress about the quizzes. They're more kind of mini tests to kind of get you in that mindset, see some new questions. Kind of make sense? Okay. Does that answer your question on quizzes too? Semester exams, we're going to run with 3 semester exams, kind of broken up in a pseudo-natural order. So we'll start off with a basic one on up through proteins, just kind of the basic structure. And then we'll look at some protein function when we're looking at enzymes. And then we'll do one on DNA and RNA. Okay? That covers 3/4 of the semester. The last quarter of the semester will be on new material that you'll see on the final, but you won't see it on a semester exam. Okay? Your semester exams will be primarily multiple choice. I might ask some short answer, but I'm probably going to focus on just keeping them as close as possible to multiple choice, okay? Just to make it easier for me to grade, in all honesty. Okay? They will be cumulative in nature, but the primary focus will be on that current section of material. Where I would say you're going to see the largest cumulative issue is with exam 2, because exam 2 is looking at enzyme activities, largely from proteins. So a lot of that protein structure that we talked about in exam 1 is going to show up in exam 2. When we talk about DNA and RNA, you probably won't see anything from exam 1 or 2. You might see a little bit, but very small carryover. The final exam will be 50% entirely off of the semester exams. Okay, I will take those questions directly off of it. I have a pretty good habit of tracking important questions, particularly questions that people get wrong. Okay, so when you get your exams back, find out what you got wrong and make sure you know what the answer is supposed to be. Because when it shows up on the final, you'd like to get it right. Okay? So I really want you to learn from previous mistakes and kind of push forward from there. Yeah? You do not need to buy any Scantrons. I bought 1,000 last semester, quite literally 1,000. So I'll supply them. You don't have to worry about that. I can buy them cheaper too, because I'm buying 1,000 of them. The final exam, yeah, we already talked about that first part. The second 50% will be questions based on student projects. So at the very end of the semester, we'll do half-hour presentations, which we'll talk about here in just a little bit, about a selection of topics. If you take a look at the very last page of the syllabus, I think, it says something about writing assignments. Well, it doesn't list the topics. So I'll be posting a topics section and some more details on what this writing assignment and presentations will entail, what those possible topics will be. Okay? Part of that is going to be that each presenting group is going to write 5 questions. Okay? You can decide multiple choice or short answer based on your presentation. Okay? And then I will go through and select questions from each of those groups based on that material and throw those onto the exam. Okay? So you will have seen those as well. So what's going on with the writing project and presentation? So the last quarter of the semester will be student presentations. Okay? So one of the things that I want you to get out of this class is that biochemistry is this massive field of all sorts of little things. Okay? Probably one of my issues with it. I don't see a big story to tell with biochemistry. I see a bunch of little neat stories. There's a protein here that does this. There's DNA that does this. There's RNA that does this. Okay? And each of those individual stories is very neat and unique on its own, but the connecting theme that runs them all together could argue goes all the way back to the origins of life and why it all works. Well, unfortunately, we don't know any of that, so we don't have that connecting theme through it. Okay? So what we'll talk about in those first 3 quarters is kind of the fundamentals, the general basics behind it. What makes proteins? What goes into their structure? How do enzymes work? What's some ways to study them? And then the same with DNA. how does that end up in general working? The last quarter will focus on more special projects, okay, narrower details. Here's a special case of glycolysis. Here's where you put all these proteins and enzymes together to generate some aspect, okay? So the topics in general summarize the last, what was the last chapter I've listed on here? Chapter 12. I think those general topics cover the last 4 or 5 chapters, and I've thrown in some extra things as well, okay? Particularly for those of you that want to go into pharmacy, probably care less about the enzymes in DNA and RNA, and probably more about how drugs interact with those. That's biochemistry, okay? So you can go through and come up with a project discussing how a particular drug shuts down or allows different reaction pathways, okay? So it is kind of an open idea to try and address all of these things. This is where you can provide some more input too. So the writing assignment, I kind of want 2 people to choose a topic of interest. Okay, so ideally you come up with a topic, find somebody else in the class that's interested in that as well, and then you would both write independent papers. Okay. That way we can get kind of an individual grade, okay, but you still have someone to confer with, find papers, you can share the same resources, I'm fine with that, but the paper itself is yours and unique. Okay. That's how I've been envisioning this. Yes.
Presentations given together.
And then the presentations will be given together. Okay, so you will then meet up and you can go through and look at each other's papers and say, okay, I like how you described this. Maybe you should describe this to the class and I'll describe this section. Okay? And then so you can kind of collaboratively work to make that presentation. How do you guys feel about that? Really? Oh, wait, cool. Then I won't suggest anything else. So that's kind of where I want to stick with that. Okay? So you come up, find a topic that you find of interest, and it could very well be different aspects of it. Maybe you want to look at a drug involved in shutting down glycolysis where somebody else wants to do glycolysis. Those topics are related enough for me that you could do a presentation together on that. Okay? So it doesn't have to be the exact same topic. You're both doing a report on glycolysis. They can be related to each other. Okay? Kind of makes sense? And I think this will make it a little bit more interesting with the class as well, because you can bring biochemistry back to something that you're interested in. Okay? So it doesn't have to be what I care about. Okay? Those presentations will be about 30 minutes, and we'll have 5 to 10 minutes in between while the other group gets set up with their presentation to kind of ask questions, maybe go over your exam questions, that kind of a thing. With the number of students in the classroom, we'll probably only need 3 to 4 weeks, which leaves an extra week or 2. So what I'll end up doing is looking at the topics that you guys have selected, and anything that hasn't been picked that I think is particularly important, or maybe you pick all the important ones and I'll pick something I think is cool, I will give presentations in the exact same format that you have to present. Okay? And I'm trying to say presentation, not a lecture. So I'll go through and pick, I think I've got it set up on the syllabus as 4 presentations. So I will start off the whole presentation sequence so you guys can get an idea on how to format and what I would kind of expect out of it, and then you guys would follow it up with your topics. Okay? Make sense? And then I have to do the same work that you do, except I'm not writing it. Okay. Sound fair? Yes.
Maybe I missed this, but are you providing topics? Or
I will provide topics. I thought it was at the end of the syllabus. I must have decided it was taking up too much paper and didn't put it on the very end of the syllabus. I will be putting together a little bit more of a formal organization to the writing assignment and listing all of those topics and posting that by Friday. Yeah.
So I'm wondering, do you know if there's any sort of like place to go that talks about writing scientifically? Because like I've had so many classes where writing is required, but I haven't actually taken a writing for science class, and it seems a lot different.
Yes. I'm not going to get too specific or nitpicky on how it's specifically written. I will put together some ideas on, primary thing being I's, we's, scientists, they's, bad. Pretty much everything else is fine. Okay. Where a lot of graduate students learn how to write is ultimately from reading research papers. And that's where that writing assignment is really going to come into play, is finding those research papers about those topics and reading through those. Because then you can start to discern how they're formatting things and what's going on with it. I will be trying to talk with the library to see if we can't set up library hours where we'll all meet in the library, and the library will say, okay, this is how you'd set up a research assignment. Here's where you would go for this piece. Here's where you go for this piece. I haven't done that yet because I've been swamped in trying to get everything else set up, and that's why I'm not going to care as much about the writing of it. Okay. So I am going to try to get you that extra information. Other questions? Interesting things about grading with the presentations, at least that I think was a pseudo-brilliant idea on my part, to help you guys both improve your presentations for future classes and public speaking and all sorts of other fun stuff like that. I'm going to have everybody here grade you as well. So you can go through and provide constructive criticism. I will then go through and type up all the criticisms and critiques and then give those back to each of the individual presenters. And I will allow the class to grade each of the presentations as well, making up a certain percentage of the possible grade. Okay, so I think I've got it set up, I think it's in the syllabus even, 60% of the presentation grade will be based on the class. Okay? I'm not going to make it 100% because you guys, being a small class, will all collude and give everybody A's. Okay? So we'll do some adjustment for that. I would guess that it's not going to be a big deal. You're not going to fail the class because of the presentations, okay? Unless you just stand up here. Okay? You got to do something, okay, related to biochemistry. Questions on that? Okay. Biochemistry is a pretty massive field. You could get away with a lot of different things. Okay? If you think you're going to be pushing the limits, talk to me.
I was just wondering, like, does it have to just, I mean, I know it'd be related to something you've taught previously, but I just...
You've got a pretty long leash. So,
It's huge.
so I'd be surprised if anybody came up with a topic where I'd say no. Okay? If anything, I might say no, that is way too difficult. You don't want to do that. But you're probably got free reign. So I did mention the percentage cutoffs, attendance. Everybody's going to be required to be here to help with that kind of attendance. You will be grading the presentations. The presenters will also have 5 exam questions. So hopefully those 5, in theory, you guys are nice enough to each other where you write 5 questions that are talked about in your presentation, so that everybody now has some of that extra material. The grading will be anonymous. So like I said, you'll type or write up whatever you want about an individual presentation. I'll go through, weed out repeating comments or weed out nasty comments if someone really gets that nasty. I would hope that doesn't happen. And then pass those back to the presenters probably a week later, worst case by the final. Okay? And then, yeah, more details will follow as soon as I get that all written, put together. Extra credit, this is something I like to offer because everybody likes to ask about it. Okay? Except I'm kind of a jerk when it comes to extra credit. When does everybody ask for extra credit? End of the semester. You're failing the class, give me extra credit so I can pass the class. That's a bit disingenuous because really what you said is that you don't like the class, you didn't pay attention at all, just give me something to pass the class. Well, if that was the case, why don't I just give you extra credit at the beginning of the class and say, peace out. Okay. The class does have information in it that is useful, so I want you to be studying and constantly looking at that information. So the extra credit that I'm going to offer is 2%, which isn't a lot, but if you look at extra credit, that's a pretty reasonable bump. Okay. That's enough to bump you from a lower letter grade to a higher one. Okay, so it'll catch people in the borderline, and it usually affects probably 10% of the class, so 2 or 3 people. It is very kind of a sneaky, dastardly thing to do as far as this extra credit. I'm going to ask you to submit dialogues. Okay, those of you that have had me before might be aware of this. So throughout the semester, what I want you to do is to review what you have learned and studied and tell me about it. All right? And it's going to be a dialogue. You're going to converse with me. But I don't want, and I'm doing it for my other class, I don't want to sit down for 50 separate individual appointments for someone to tell me what they learned that week. Okay? So instead what we'll do is over email. You will send me an email telling me what you learned that week. All right? I see a large variety in what people have learned. Some people come in with a single sentence, and it works. Usually I see the single sentence or two, and I read it real carefully and go, that's too short, and then I read it, and okay, yeah, you did actually learn something. Okay? Other people will send me an entire Word document, okay, summarizing everything within the chapter or everything within the lecture. Perfectly acceptable as well. You're probably spending more time than you need to for just 2%. Okay? But that's fine. If that's what you're doing already, that's a good thing. There are some people that have amazingly good studying habits. If you're already showing that you have good study habits, just prove it to me by sending it to me in this email. Okay? Yes?
So 1 per week or 1 per lecture?
Officially, 1 per week. Okay? Oops, I forgot to fix that. It should be Tuesday or Thursday's lecture. So I can adjust that real quickly. That should be Tuesday or Thursday. And there's kind of a couple reasons behind this thought process. Number one, I want this happening throughout the semester. Extra credit is to prove that you're putting in the effort and the work to get through the class. And if for some reason you've put in all that effort and work and you're still not passing the class, I want to give you credit for having done that work. Okay? So it's a way of kind of accounting for that in kind of a small portion. Wow, I really didn't edit this one, did I? I fixed the bottom of it. So what I want to see is at least 1 a week. Okay? If you want to submit more than 1, that's fine. I'm not going to all of a sudden start taking points away if you put in too many. Okay? But it's roughly 1 a week. We've got 15 weeks throughout the semester. Everybody panics and forgets 1 every so often, so we'll do 12 out of the semester. So that's what I would expect to see minimally, okay, is 12. That does not mean that if after the first exam everybody's failing and you go, oh my gosh, I really need to start studying, but I've already missed the possibility to get 12, that you don't send in dialogues. Send in the dialogues anyway. Okay? Worst case, you send in 6 or 7. Okay? At the end of the semester, the person that sent in the most only has 10. 6 or 7 is not that much lower. If you're close to that borderline, I might very well give it to you anyway. Okay? What you're trying to prove is, again, that you're putting in that effort. What's outlined in the syllabus and what we have on the slides here are kind of those major cutoffs. I'm more than willing to be flexible around those, but I really need to see that effort from you. Okay? So now the question becomes is, why am I doing this? And it's not out of the kindness of my heart. Okay? Because ultimately this only really helps you, but there's kind of a dastardly meaning behind it. Okay? Any idea why I would do this? What's that underlying meaning? What's that?
To learn how we learn.
So that's going to be a nice thing behind it, and I really would like to get that going. I'm not sure that was definitely not the intentional motive behind it to begin with, but that is part of it. Okay? Reviewing the material, helping you think about it, and actually starting to realize on your own what is working for you and what isn't working for you. That's all on you. That's your study habits. If I can get you to start studying better when you move into other classes, hopefully this dialogue thought process continues across and you improve all your other classes as well, okay, because you've improved your study habits. Yeah?
Because doing it within 24 hours helps you so much more than doing it within 48 or more.
So there's this weird 24-hour timeline in it. Okay? There have been studies that say after 24 hours of hearing a lecture, you remember nothing of the lecture. Okay? So if you show up to class and you wait to study until it's over 24 hours after that lecture, it doesn't matter what I said or did in class, you aren't going to remember it. That was a completely wasted class. So by giving you this incentive to review that material, I'm increasing the likelihood that that lecture actually did something for you. Okay? It doesn't always work, but hopefully. Okay? That's the intent behind it. It's trying to build, again, those study habits. Okay? So that's all good things for you. That still doesn't fix the underlying meaning. Why did I decide to do this? Kind of a devilish reason behind it. What happens to your grade if you go through and do the dialogues? Just in general. Probably will increase because you're working harder, you're starting to study, you're reviewing that material. So your grade goes up. In theory, what happens at the end of the semester? Your grade went up so much that do you need the extra credit? No. So the extra credit becomes then useless. Okay? Sort of. Okay? The idea is, again, to get you to improve yourself. If you're improved on your own, you don't need the extra credit to begin with. This is an incentive to get you started on improving what you do and how you do it.
In theory.
Okay? In theory, yes. Okay, it is very theoretical. I am receiving probably 50 of these emails a week, assuming everybody goes through and does it, which isn't going to be the case. I can't respond to each of those. So what I've gone through and done, or will have done very shortly, is set up an automatic filter in Gmail so that you send me with this subject line, and then give me your dialogue, and in theory, your name on it. It's always fun to get email from somebody's Yahoo account where it's not their name, and I have no idea who sent me the dialogue. Okay? Give me your name, at least on the first dialogue, and then I'll be able to tie that back to you. Okay? That subject line will automatically get filtered out of my email into spam and trash. No, it goes into a permanent folder. Into a permanent folder that I then have the ability to, on some free occasion, go through and review, okay, to verify that you are actually spending time, as opposed to sending me emails, haha, you're not reading this, and I'm getting extra credit anyway. Okay? I will go through, read them periodically, and if I think you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, I'll send you another email saying, hey, you need to fix this. You just told me that you learned bonding. Okay? At least that works for organic chemistry. Oh, I learned that there are proteins. What are proteins? What makes up proteins? Okay? Give me a little bit more than just a key word that you happen to remember from lecture. Define it. Okay? Give me something to show that you reviewed a little bit. That's all I'm trying to look for. Yes?
24 hours from Thursday?
24 hours from Tuesday or Thursday's lecture. Okay? So if you decided that you've learned something today that you thought was awesome and you want to send in that dialogue, you have 24 hours, so it would be Wednesday at 9:30.
By the end of class.
When is class time?
9:40.
9:40. Okay, so I got a little more time. At 9:40, I would expect that email.
So ideally 2 per week then?
So you can send 2 per week. I'll really officially only count 1. Okay? It is something I do want to see throughout the semester. Like I said, again, worst case, you send 2 per week, and then you can forget 2 weeks. Okay? Cover your bases, send more than less. Okay? How do you know that I've actually received that email, particularly if I don't read all of them? Okay? It's in your sent, it's not in mine. Okay? How do you prove that I actually got a hold of it? I will set up an automatic response. So if you do not get an automatic response from me, talk to me. There's something going on. Either I'm not getting it for some reason, or the automatic response isn't functioning properly. Okay? We need to get that figured out to make sure that you do get credit for it. Okay? Kind of suck to go through and do this every single week, and then at the end, ask for your extra credit. And really, I don't have any proof that you did it. Okay? We still have loops around because we can go through the sent on your inbox, but it wouldn't be that big of a deal. Okay, 2 hands. Who wants to go first? Okay.
Oh. Do we send it to this email? This CGC
Michael.mcfavlin@cgc.edu. Yes, that is the email to use. Okay. Officially, you are only allowed to correspond with me through a Maricopa email address. Okay. Unofficially, I don't care. Okay. But officially, it's supposed to come through a Maricopa email address.
But it won't, we'll still get somebody.
You'll still get an automatic response. Yeah. The Maricopa email address is for some vague reason about liability, and I don't understand it at all. Okay. But that's the reason. Questions? More about dialogues? It's been exciting. It's
been an exciting hour and a half, right? There's a whole bunch of other stuff on the syllabus, attendance. Maricopa's pushed a whole lot of having mandatory attendance. I've been told by our chair that that's not official. Pretty sure he's wrong. I'm pretty sure everything I've heard from Maricopa says that you must take attendance and it must be mandatory and all this junk. The reason why? Anybody know? What's that? It's not accreditation or even financial aid.
They get paid for a student.
They get paid for student on the roster. They don't get paid for students actually attendance.
More people who graduate and more people who finish classes and do.
So it's the graduation rates, sort of, okay? What they've found is that students with high grades have really good attendance. So that means, of course, that if you attend class, you get high grades. There is a very strong correlation between grades and attendance. It is not a causation, okay? And there's very strong evidence to suggest it is not causation. If you show up to class and you just sleep through the whole lecture, okay, yes, you attended and you got all the points, you didn't get anything out of that lecture, okay? Because I record the lectures and post them, okay, what I would expect out of you guys is that when you attend, you are paying attention in class, you're listening, you're asking questions, saying you're going way too slow, speed up, slow down, that kind of stuff. Okay? So that you're actually present here. I'm not going to go through and manually check off attendance and verify that everybody was here. Okay? What you will see is the occasional quiz pop up here and there. Okay? You could potentially lose points for those. So if you're going to miss class, just let me know. Send me a quick email. I'm feeling like crap today, can't make it. Okay? I didn't eat breakfast this morning. I'm not going to be able to make it because I'm just going to pass out. Okay? I'm fine with that. Just give me some kind of heads up so that if there is a quiz, I can make it excused and it doesn't affect your grade. Okay? Withdrawals. If you want to withdraw from the class, you got to talk to me. At least you have to talk to me up to, I think, actually this afternoon. Okay? Based on Maricopa policies, if you're going to withdraw on your own without my permission, I think you can only do it today. Okay? Maybe the first week, but that's about it. Okay? After that, you need my permission to withdraw. Talk to me. We might be able to figure out some way to help you get through the class and do better than you think. Or I'll agree with you and say, yeah, you're way too far behind in the material. This is going to be too much of a challenge. Maybe satisfy some other prereqs first, and then come back and do it. Okay? And then I can do all that withdrawal process on my end really quickly and easily. Okay? So if you stop attending class, you could very well end up with a failing grade, not a W. Okay? So let me know if you want to withdraw. Disabilities, learning disabilities, particularly my tests seem to bring out a lot of learning disabilities because I give really long tests. That's fine. Okay? Long tests aren't necessarily a problem because everybody is on the same level playing field. Everybody's working within that time limit. If you have a learning disability that prevents you from reading as fast or understanding as fast, you're now no longer on that level playing field. You need that extra time. That has to get verified through disability resources, so you have to talk to them. They fill out some paperwork, they give you that paperwork, I get it, then you get all the extra time you want. Well, the extra time that they and you decide. Okay? Until I see that, I'm not doing it. Okay? So make sure you go through them. If you have questions about help, Tutoring Center is awesome. They've got lots of people that will help you out, so please take advantage of that. And then I'll be around there as well. Okay? And I do have a few names if you want a private tutor that I can pass out. I will not be a private tutor for anybody. There's some kind of moral, legal issues of accepting money from your own students, regardless of the intent. But if you need extra help, okay, you say, I need an extra study session on Saturday, let me know. What I'll end up doing is telling the whole class. I will be at this coffee shop from 10 to 2. If you got questions, feel free to show up. Okay? Civility in the classroom. You guys have made it this far. I'm sure you're pretty civil. So you can read through it and you should be okay. Any questions in general? Okay. Just to be fun, let's go ahead and